Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. I'm so excited to have the professional rule breaker herself, Kathy Walterhouse, here today. Kathy, I've had the privilege of going on your podcast as well, and we've been trying to get this together for a while. So I'm just so thrilled that we're here.
I'm so happy that we were able to do this today. And I'm just so privileged to be on your show. So thank you.
Well, let's start with your background. You have a varied career. You've been working in corporate. You've also had your own business. And you are a 9-figure sales strategy guru and coach now. What got you to that point where you decided to pour into other businesses and entrepreneurs?
Well, it's always kind of interesting because I never thought that's what I would do, even selling as much as I did. I didn't start with the intention like, oh, I'm going to sell close to $1 billion. For me, it was about doing the best that I could do for myself as well as for the company and especially my clients. I mean, I think of my clients, they're people that I want them to be successful. So I do everything possible to help them become successful, whether it was when I was working in the corporate world or now in the consulting that I do. I think if you focus on the customer and just, helping other people, I think it's always kind of amazing the things that can happen.
Definitely. Did you always think you're going to go into corporate? I know you graduated from Thunderbird. Was that like, okay, this is my path?
Well, no, I actually wanted to go to medical school.
Oh,
believe it or not. And I changed my mind when I was a senior in high school. I worked in the local hospital in the intensive care unit. And, I realized I wasn't up for the heartbreak because in the hospital, you see a lot of different things, especially in the intensive care unit. You see a lot of things. So at that point, I was like, okay, now what? I had one of those now what moments, because I have this undergraduate degree in science. What do I do with it? And I just happened to go to a job fair because I was thinking about, all these different possibilities of things that I could do. And at that job fair was somebody from the American Graduate School of International Management. And I loved traveling. I had done an abroad program when I was a junior in high school. And I was like, wow, this sounds something that I could really, sink my teeth in. So there I went. I went to Thunderbird and got an MBA at Thunderbird. And kind of the rest is history.
Yeah, that's an amazing institution. Living in Los Angeles, I know a lot of people who have gone there and have had so much success in their careers. And so that was the start of being able to travel, get out of Iowa and learn more about other parts of the country. And that then propelled you into corporate.
Yes, in a weird way. I always wanted to be, when I was in school, I took a lot of marketing classes. I mean, first off, I hadn't taken any business classes. So I crammed in 2 semesters into 1 semester of accounting because that was a prerequisite that I had to do. And then off I went to business school. So I have to say I was a little bit terrified when I got there because all these people were talking, they all had this business background. They were all talking and I was terrified because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? I have no idea what they're talking about. They know so much more than me. I have major imposter syndrome. I didn't know it at that time. But as the year went by, because it was an accelerated program, you finish anywhere, depending if you want to do an abroad program or not, a year and a half or so. And I realized the thing that I really loved was marketing. And so I thought I would go into traditional marketing. And that's actually what I was interviewing for. And then everybody that I interviewed, they would say to me, have you ever thought about going into sales? And I'd be like, ooh, no, never. Because in my mind, sales was, the slimy, the used car salesman, that's what I had in my mind. I thought that's what sales was. So, and off I went. I got a marketing job with an international Japanese company. And the next thing that happened was they decided they wanted to open up kind of like a health center. And the next thing I knew, I was in sales. And I just realized how much I love it because sales is really about helping people. And I'm not saying marketing isn't, because in marketing, you have to get your information out there. It's also putting, all of that information within people's reach is what I think of marketing. And so you're helping people there. But in sales, you can customize things so it's so specific to what it is, whether, they're moving away from pain, to pleasure, or they have this visual of something that they want to do or something that they need. It's all about helping them get to that end goal.
Yeah. Well, and that's something I want to touch on. Marketing, I feel, is so complementary because you're right. It's the other touch points that will engage a consumer or customer with a brand, but it's part of the sales cycle and it's symbiotic. You have to have both together. And
yes, you do.
And people often think of sales as a dirty word, as you were talking about. That's what your impression was. But then once you started doing it, what was the aha moment or the connection that you made that where you realized, like, this is what people were talking about when they kept asking if I want to go into sales instead?
Well, first off, I realized it wasn't slimy. And actually, let me just rephrase that. I knew what I was going to do was not going to be slimy because that's just not who I am. And then the aha moment really was when I started seeing people get excited, when they saw, as I'm, stumbling through this, because I had no idea what I was doing, like really, really no idea. And just kind of stumbling through, trying to help people understand what it was that we were offering. And I saw them getting really excited. So I was like, okay, there's more to the story when it comes to sales. And then I went on into the medical field, and I was so lucky that I found a mentor. He was actually my client. He was like one of these clients that I thought, boy, if I could ever get this client, this would be really, really amazing. I still had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I had made a phone call thinking, they're not going to ever see me. At that time, the company I worked for, this was completely outside their market. But I knew that their market that they were focusing on was really small. And I was like, there's got to be something bigger and better that we can expand into. So I called out of the blue this company and was able to make an appointment with the president of the company. I remember sitting out in the car, and they were, I would say at that point, they're a mid-sized company. They eventually went public, but I'm sitting out in the car, and I remember just sitting there going, oh my gosh, what have I done? I was terrified. Didn't really know what I was doing. Didn't want to go in. And I pulled myself out of the car. I'm like, go, just do it. What's the worst thing that can happen?
Right.
And I don't know if the company president felt sorry for me or what. And I actually at that point even hadn't realized how big they were, because he goes, come take a ride with me. And I'm thinking, okay, should I get in a car with this man? I don't really know. But I was like, he seems like somebody I could trust. And he brought me over, showed me their call center, showed me like all the things that they were doing. Because I had just gone into like their administrative office, and I was like, wow. And again, he just took me under his wing. He was almost like a grandfather to me and literally showed me everything I needed to know about sales and even negotiations. And yeah, we became really great friends, and he's since has passed. But his company eventually went public as well, and it helped the company that I work for. Because of him and all the other clients I was able to bring, they went public as well too. And so it was just really almost like a cascade of things that just fell into place.
Yeah. But you made the effort to, and you were open to those experiences and to allowing that to happen, which is fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah. So what do people get wrong about sales besides that it's this scary word and, this thing that we don't want to do because we think that it's slimy? What are some other things that people get wrong when they think about sales?
There's a lot that people get wrong about when they think about sales. I mean, right, it's slimy. And I mean, there's like different types of selling. There's slimy selling, there's scared selling. You know, those are the people that are just starting off, or maybe not even just starting off, but they just are always terrified when they're selling. You can hear it in their voice inflection. You can see it in their body language. You can see everything about it. And that's just going to be a crash and burn. Just like slimy selling is a crash and burn. You might be able to get a sale out of it, but you're never going to get referrals. I mean, that's really where the juice comes in sales. Wow. It's the referrals. It's the word of mouth. It's the reputation that you build. So I have a saying that I always tell people about, that I'm helping, if they're trying to learn how to sell, is sell like you would want to be sold to. It's kind of the fallback on the golden rule. I mean, would you want somebody to hammer you over the head? Wow. Or would you want somebody to sell you something that is not going to work for you, that's not what you need? No, you wouldn't. You want somebody that's going to be your partner. And that's really what sales is you partner with your customer. It doesn't matter if it's like people buying things off the website, or if you're in person and you are, selling, you're sitting right in front of them and you're helping them.
Yeah. You also mentioned negotiations as something that you learned. Well, how does negotiations play? And I will say, I just took a class on negotiations and I'm like, why didn't I have this when I was younger? I loved it. And we worked through scenarios and did role playing and all of this kind of stuff. But it's something that I think a lot of people forget about or don't realize that it's so important. So I would love to hear, what did your mentor teach you about negotiation as part of that sales cycle?
It's interesting because negotiations is my sweet spot. That's the thing. First off, I love negotiating, especially big contracts. Love negotiating big contracts. There's nothing more fun to me than negotiating really big contracts. But, I learned by watching. The gentleman, his nickname was Mr. K. So I learned by watching what he did and how he treated people and the back and forth, because it doesn't have to be contentious. Can it be contentious sometimes? Absolutely. But I think if the negotiations is contentious, you're missing something. You have missed something along the way in the sales process. You probably know what they want, but you don't know what they need. Because they will always tell you, I want this. I want a lower price. I want these many units. I want whatever. I want, right? But you have to take the time to really dig in and start asking questions. And that is where you learn what people need. I mean, a simple thing like, for example, when they say, hey, I want a lower price. Well, why do they want a lower price? Do they have a budget that they have to meet, that maybe they only have so many dollars? Is it that they want to look good for their boss? Is it that it's a power move over you somehow? There's so many different things. Or is it that they think that's what they need to do? I mean, the list could go on. But if you ask questions of them, first off, you're probably going to be the only one that asks them those questions. Because most people in sales make the critical mistake when they're there. They're just going to ask, the surface level. Right. And they'll know just the surface level, like the demographics, maybe a little bit about the business, that type of stuff, versus knowing the ins and outs of their business or of that person, depending on who you're selling to. And also, what are their dreams? What keeps them up at night? What would make them do a happy dance if they were able to get that? And again, it's just asking questions. I love the question why.
Oh, yeah.
I love the question why. It drives my husband crazy sometimes because he'll be like, he'll tell me when we go out somewhere, don't ask questions. And I'm like, but I think the more questions you ask, without being annoying, of course, but, you just dig down into, those multiple layers. And when you see emotion in a customer if you're doing a face-to-face.
Well,
And you can also see it in negotiations, as well. But when you see emotion, that is when you've hit gold.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about creating that win-win, but in a way that feels good for everybody and that gets them what they want, whether they knew it or not, right? Might make them look good or whatever the case may be. Yeah.
If it's not a win-win, especially in negotiations, if it's not a win-win, like if you win and they lose, you're not going to have the customer for long. If they win and you lose, you're going to affect something in whatever company you're in, whether it's your own company or somebody else. It could be profitability, it could be labor, it could be so many different things. So, always look for the scales of balance when you're negotiating so that everyone can win in negotiations. And like I said, know your customer, better than they know themselves. Actually, Mr. K said that to me one day. He said, you know my business and you know what I need before I do. And that's where you need to be.
Yeah.
Especially if you're negotiating really big deals, that's where you need to be.
How have you seen sales change over the 25-year career that you've had working in corporate and then now helping coach people?
Boy, there's been a lot of changes. So, before sales was more boots on the ground a lot of times. And if there was, maybe some marketing that people saw something, in the newspaper, like I'm dating myself, newspaper, magazine, those type of things. Before the internet.
Right.
Right? It was all boots on the ground, or it was things that you saw somewhere, or maybe an ad you saw on TV, right? That would lead them to someplace, somewhere. The internet changed everything. And of course, AI is changing everything. So I think you have to, embrace AI, but you have to know, I think in this day and age, more than ever, you really have to know your customer inside and out.
Yeah.
If you don't know who your customer is inside and out, chances are your messaging is going to be off. Your product that you're offering to them is going to be off. The solution's going to be off. I think of it almost as a Venn diagram, if you can think of that.
Well,
So you have the customer needs all these different things and they want these things. And then you're this other circle of all these things that only you can offer, only your company can offer. And where they overlap is the sweet spot, is where you need to live. You need to live there in your marketing. You need to live there in your sales. And both sales and marketing go hand in hand, and they have to work together so that the message is on point of what it is that you're doing.
Ugh. It drives me crazy when people have a product they're trying to sell, but then the way that they show up on social media, for instance, the way they might communicate, the way they write back to comments even, doesn't seem like it's the same brand. Yeah. Because then I'm like, why would somebody trust you if you don't have the cohesion?
I agree. It's so funny that you said that about social media, because I recently sent a message back because I thought it was a friend of mine that was posting something for her business in social media. And I sent her a message like, hey, since when have you been doing this X, whatever it was. And then the response that I got, I was like, okay, that's not her.
No.
And I could tell that wasn't like brand. I was like, that is a virtual assistant that hasn't been trained correctly on how to respond, or it's a bot that maybe hasn't been set up correctly, an AI bot, potentially that wasn't set up correctly, or something funny's going on. So again, it's that whole thing. It's the messaging and exactly what you said, Annika. How do you respond? Because responses, whether they're electronic or they're in, you pick up the phone and you call somebody, or it's like a message, email or messaging that people see, that's part of a connection campaign.
Mm-hmm.
I think of, to me, a connection campaign is if you think of Like I have kids and my kids are, they'll tap me on the shoulder or they'll whatever. They're constantly, mom, this, that type of thing. That is exactly what you need to be doing to your potential customer or to your customer. It's that little touch, letting them know that you're here. If they're your customer already, just keep in touch with them, send them out some information or, especially if it's, more boots on the ground type of thing. Hey, did you know this trade show's going on or whatever? Or, hey, did you know this is going on in your industry? If it's not, if it's all electronic, it is something, people are just buying on the internet, make sure that you're sending that. It's that touch factor over and over again.
And I want to talk about your transition. There's several things I want to go back to, but first I want to talk about the professional rule breaker as a business and a podcast. And you do a lot of other things as well, but what was the impetus behind deciding to get out of the world of corporate and doing great sales work and leading other organizations and then going off and becoming an entrepreneur?
That's an interesting question. And this is something, and now I always tell people, and I guess it was a good experience for me to have this. When you get to a point where either you don't agree with the messaging or the way of the business practice, I think it's time to leave. And also that was making me unhappy. The same type of thing. If you are unhappy doing whatever it is that you're doing, you can't do justice to the product and more so to the customers. So for me, it was more of a messaging thing more than anything else. I have a certain standard that I live by that I do not ever violate. It's just who I am. And so I thought, it's time. It's definitely time. And I actually was thinking of going away from sales. And it was so funny because people reached out to me and were like, no, we need your help. Can you help us? And so I kind of got dragged back in there. And so, when I was coming up, I was like, okay, I guess I have to form an LLC and I got to do all these things. And when I was coming up with my name, I just knew that what I did was different. And that's the reason I was successful. And I've always kind of pushed the envelope and thought outside the box. I've never liked being the same. That was one of the things that actually drove me crazy in the corporate world, especially for one company, because there was one company I worked with that they loved everybody to look the same. They wanted everybody in a blue suit.
Oh, wow.
And, just almost like robots, looking the same, dressing the same, acting the same, saying the same thing. Oh my gosh, the training, sometimes training and sales training, they're like, we want you to say this. And they don't want you to go outside. And we're talking high level sales. We're not even talking low level sales, high level sales. And I'm like, okay, I can take this and incorporate it, but you still have to add your own flavor because otherwise the customers are going to be like, you're just like everybody else. Yeah. You sound the same. You look the same now. So, and I'll always remember sometimes some of these big companies you go in as an army, they all have 20 people with you for a big meeting. And everybody had a blue suit. And I was like, I'm wearing plum. And I purposely did that. That's who I am. That's what I do. And I just think it's really important to be authentically whoever you are. There was another gentleman that worked in the same company as I did. And I swear he looked like Bono from YouTube. He had like these tinted glasses he always wore and spiked hair. Well, guess what? This giant hospital system, at that point, it was a hospital system, really, really giant, one of the biggest ones in the U.S. They always remembered me and they always remembered him. And guess who they called? They would call me or they would call him.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but again, I also had that win-win mentality. I wanted everybody to win. So I think they knew that as well.
Yeah. But I love the fact that, and this is something I think we see when we pay attention. Our audience is going to tell us what they want. Our customers are going to tell us. And so clearly when you left to start your business, you were finding that you were wanting to get away from sales, but people really wanted to understand what made you so successful. and how they could incorporate those techniques into their own businesses, and whether having you come in as a keynote or a trainer or workshops or listening to your podcast or, working with them. So how hard was that to like transition from one way of doing things, one world, into being your own boss, having to create your company from scratch, getting those clients in the door?
I would say the hardest thing for me was the transition from boots on the ground to the whole electronic space.
Right.
For me, that was probably the hardest thing, because you have to put yourself out there, but in an electronic way, and make sure that it resonates with the people that you're targeting.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's almost like a third wall that's there. So breaking through that third wall, is, I think, a lot of times, especially in this day and age, I think it's a struggle for a lot of people. You and I had talked previously, and some people don't like going on camera, or they don't like the sound of their voice, or they get really nervous, or whatever, those type of things. And that's something that breaks that third wall is, people get to know who you are, and they're either going to love you or they're going to hate you.
Yeah.
Right. And if they hate you, great, because they were not meant for you.
Exactly.
You want the people that are going to love you.
Yeah. And we could go off on so many tangents right now. So many thoughts going through my head. Yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that it used to be that people wanted professional content, everything has to look perfect. And now they really go more for that authentic content. Even major brands want to shoot things that look like they're real people and that they're engaging. Because as you said, that helps people understand, are you for them? Are you not? Like, is this somebody I want to work? And I think you do a great job of that on your social media.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I'm glad you said that, because I have a little bit of a perfectionist thing and going on, which I've let go. But it was so funny. I learned something just by doing a Facebook ad. Because with the Facebook ad, you can do it all professional and looking pretty or whatever. But I ended up, again, I had this great mentor for Facebook. And she's like, no, just go out and just shoot it. And I'm thinking, whoa, It's the first one I've ever done. So we were in Houston. And it was hot.
Oh, yes.
And I didn't know what, I knew kind of what I was going to say, because it needs to be, she was like, make it unscripted. I'm like, okay, but make sure you teach something type of thing. And so I was like, all right, fine. So I took a selfie stick, went out, and I felt like I was having a really bad hair day and didn't look good, and I did it with a selfie stick. Oh my gosh, the response I got from that one versus the one that was just, all pretty and perfect. I was so surprised. And, I think it was part of it because I was moving as well too. I wasn't just sitting. But I think people really like to see who you are, because if you're all perfect, they'll be like, I can never do what they're doing. Versus if you're a little bit of a hot mess.
Yeah, if you're willing to share, the good and the bad.
Yeah. Because things happen. Even doing a live, I've had some crazy things. I'm going to spell it out. SIRI. Thought I was asking a question.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
And I happen to have my iPad, and I'm like, this is during an interview, and she is asking, she's trying to respond back to, and I'm like, oh my God, it was just like, but you got to go with the flow. Those are the things that people love you for. And I've actually had a couple people say to me, oh my gosh, I saw that thing with that live that you did with Siri. Ooh, I almost said, oh gosh. I'm not afraid now. So yeah, I think, messy and doesn't have to be perfect. Just go and do it.
Yeah, just do it. That's so important. At what part in the process did you start your podcast?
I started my podcast, let me think here, probably a year in or so, somewhere right around there. Mm-hmm. And it was really for marketing purposes was my original intention.
Whoa.
But then in doing my podcast, I realized the value that I could offer because I've been able to have like these amazing guests. Like you're an upcoming guest, but I've had, the former U.S. Surgeon General. I've had a Nobel Peace Prize winner. I've had someone that used to head up Forbes in the Baltic area. These people that I find are, that I look at and I think, oh my gosh, wow, they're so much more successful than I am. But they can impart their wisdom on what they did, to reach where they got. And what's really interesting that I have found is nobody had the intention. Like the U.S. Surgeon General, he never had the intention to do that. That wasn't what his intention was. And I bet you my Nobel Peace Prize winner, if I asked him, I bet you that's not what he set out to do. Really? Just like everyone else. It's kind of like you start somewhere and you do the absolute best that you do in whatever that is to help people, the situation, companies, whatever it is, and be willing to pivot and morph a little. Yes. Because you just don't know where that's going to take you and who else you can help. Yeah. It's almost like an unpredictable path. Because I even think about myself. I went from wanting to go to medical school and being in theater and all these different things into working for a small company, eventually going public. It's all this like craziness. And then going back, to doing some, professional acting as well. And a podcast, like in a million years. I never thought I was going to have a podcast. I never set out to have a podcast. Somehow the idea, I should have a podcast came to my mind. And same thing, I had no idea what I was doing when I started.
Yep, same. We have to learn and where we started. It's so funny because it's the same thing. Where we start with our podcast might not be where we end up.
Yeah.
And I find I keep changing it, just we tweak, right? Or you go, oh, this is really what I want to talk about. Or these guests that I want to have. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because for me, originally it was all about having business people on. Mm-hmm. And then I realized people outside of business as well, they have a story that can help entrepreneurs out there. Or maybe, it's not even about even helping the entrepreneurs, is, help somebody have their best life, whether it's a business life or it's a personal life. They're going to learn like little itty bitty things. I mean, because you just don't know. That one statement, that one thing that you say to somebody could make their life turn around. Absolutely. And if their life turns around, who could they help? Could you help, a president of the United States, somebody that discovers the cure for cancer, whatever it might be, that's out there. It's like just paying it forward, really, more than anything else.
So what does a typical day look like for you? Because you wear so many hats.
Well, a typical day, I'm starting every morning with either listening to something that's uplifting in some shape or form, and then maybe doing like a meditation or something that's like associated with that. Because I think I'm always a happy person when I wake up, but I think it's really important to have your head screwed on straight when you start the day. Because I don't know if you've ever, had something bad happen, and for the people that let it affect them the next day, well, guess what? If you do, your day is going to be, and excuse my language, but it's going to be shit. So I think if you recenter yourself and you start your day outright, and then I always try to go work out if I can. It doesn't always happen that way. But I think for me, that gives me a lot of energy. I don't think I could do what I do and all the things that I do if I didn't have the amount of energy that I have. And then just depending if I'm doing some private coaching, or right now I'm building out some products as well. So, it'll evolve into those things. And then, of course, I have 3 kids. So when they're around, because I still have 2 in college, but when they're around, I always try to make a point of making sure that I spend time with them because that time just goes by so fast. And, in the scheme of things, isn't that what it's all about? Is, spending time with the people that you love, whether you're blood related or you're not related to them.
100%. That is, you were saying, I think that in one of our conversations, what your kids do is you're going to be more proud of that than of any achievements that you've had. And I think the same thing about my daughter. We're just starting to look at colleges and do that, but I know that whatever she does, I'm going to be her cheerleader and champion, and I can't wait to see what that is.
Yeah. And I kind of even feel that way about my customers as well, is that I am more excited and get more juice out of their accomplishments rather than my own. Because like for me, I'm kind of like, yeah, that's great. But it's kind of like, yeah, all right. I expected to do it. I always have this expectation, of I almost make things what I call a non-negotiable. When I set something up, it's going to happen. And whichever path pivot that I'm going to need to take, it's really a mindset that I have. And I try to impart that on anybody that I help. I think when you make things a non-negotiable, you don't give yourself wiggle room, to procrastinate. Failing is totally okay. I think failing is a great thing to learn from, but you take your failure, you pivot then. Okay, well, that didn't work to get to where I want to go. What else can I try? Make sure you ask yourself those questions.
Very important. These 2 questions may be related or not, so I'm going to bundle them. One is, if somebody's a new entrepreneur, new to sales, what's 1 or 2 or maybe 3 quick things that they really need to understand or think about with their mindset? And then the second question is, you mentioned AI earlier. How is that continuing to change how we sell?
Okay. So first with mindset, let's talk about that. Mindset is, I would say, about 90% of the game in business and probably even in life, and especially in sales. If you don't have the right mindset in sales, you're going to end up crashing and burning eventually. I mean, it's so important to have that mindset. And it's really easy, at least in sales, to change your mindset. I call it an about face. And an about face basically means you stop thinking about yourself. You focus on your customer, the nerves, everything about it. If you are focused on the person that you're speaking to or the person that's electronically that you are marketing to, all the fears, all that other stuff just kind of fades away. Because just remember, your customer ultimately is somebody else just like you. It's a person. So there's no reason, to be afraid of them. They eat breakfast just like you. They have to eat breakfast or lunch or dinner, right? They go to the bathroom. They do all the same things. They have the highs and the lows just like you. A lot of times, people put people on pedestals because they have accomplished a lot. And that's actually one of the things I had figured out in my podcast, because there's a couple of my guests, I was like, oh my gosh, right beforehand, I had a little moment, but then I'm like, I switch it and I go, this is going to be so much fun. I get to talk to them, get to figure out how they tick, and it's same thing. Focus on the other person. Even in a podcast, that's what you do. You focus on the other person as well. So I would say with mindset, start off the day, make sure you're doing something uplifting, whatever it is. And then, switch your focus to your customer. And I think that'll help a lot in businesses, at least. And then your second question, AI.
Yeah.
Okay. AI. My gosh. Everybody needs to embrace AI. For my business, what it's done is it has simplified things. I have a great support staff, and they use AI for a lot of things that they use. And I'm thrilled that they do, because it makes their tasks easier, and it allows them and it allows me to be, again, in my zone of genius. And that's really where you want to reside. So I don't think AI, there's probably going to be some lower, maybe level jobs that maybe AI might take, But first off, I think companies have been using AI for a really long time. They just never called it that.
Yeah.
And then once they called it AI, that's when everybody kind of got scared. And so I just think fully embrace AI, especially in your business, embrace it, because I think it's going to make a difference. And if you're old enough to remember the time, like I am, when there wasn't internet, everybody was scared to death of the internet as well, too. Right. They thought that, that there was going to be just massive chaos in the world because of the internet. And look what happened. It's literally changed how we do our everyday life and everyday business.
Everything. Yeah. Do you have any AI tools that you love that you could recommend?
Oh, I like Descript a lot. We use Descript for our podcast. I like, of course, OpenAI, ChatGPT. Sometimes even just brainstorming things, I'll be like, hey, I'll put some parameters in there, some prompts in there for certain things and ask questions. Oh my gosh, came up with some of the best artwork. I was so shocked because I've tried some other ones for artwork and I thought, well, let me use ChatGPT and see if it can do some artwork and uses, I think it's called Dolly. I don't know if that's how it's pronounced or not. And I was like, wait a minute. Are you kidding me? That's perfect.
Wow.
And that actually is the cover. We use that for cover art I have an ebook about AI and sales. And then I also have an ebook about the ultimate starter guide to sales or something like that. I think is what it's called. And if you look at the cover art, that's all AI.
Amazing.
Yeah. Oh. That's all AI. And it was so simple. It was crazy. And that was just asking, hey, ChatGPT, this is what this book is about. And I gave it examples of what was in there.
Yeah.
Can you create cover for me? And it did. And I was like, wow. On the first try for one of them. And the second one took me about 10 tries.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly what I wanted.
Yeah. That still cuts down the amount of time.
Yes.
That's so great.
Absolutely.
Do you have a favorite client that you've worked with or where you've seen their growth?
Well, you know what? It's interesting you said that. So I have a lot of favorite clients.
Yes.
And I know
like your favorite child, but
there's some that are their loyal podcast listeners as well. So I love you guys that listen, by the way. But I'm just actually going to go back to my first original really favorite client that I had, Mr. K, but how to do business the right way. Mm-hmm. In which, it's that thing that I said, you treat customers like you would want to be treated. Mm-hmm. And I think that is really, really important. And even a sentence that I still to this day use, when I am asking somebody for something, is, could you be so kind to blah, blah, blah. I've always used that. And that's in honor of Mr. K. I got that from Mr. K as well. Actually, I'm going to make sure that his son listens to this as well. Big influence in my life. And I was just lucky, I would say more than anything else, that, I actually pulled myself out of the car to go talk to him because I was terrified to talk to him.
Yeah. Works real well. I love that story. And everybody can go to your website and get information about the podcast, working with you, ebooks, everything's there. Professional role play. Fantastic.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I'd love to help anybody out. And even if you're interested, I offer a free 20-minute strategy session in which we help you find your low-hanging fruit. Or if you want to talk about strategy, we can always do that too. You can find that at theprofessionalrulebreaker.com/strategy-session. And just go to my calendar and you can book a free session with me.
Fantastic. Kathy, there's so much more we could talk about, but I know you'll be back. So I'm really excited to continue our conversations. And I just really appreciate you sharing your story, all of the information that you know about sales, making it a little less scary for all of us and be able to think about it in new, refreshing ways.
Thank you so much for having me on my show. And as far as putting me also in front of your audience, really? I appreciate it.
Oh my gosh. Well, and I do have one more question. Do you have a favorite quote, mantra, verse?
I do. I sometimes get the order wrong, but it is winners never quit and quitters never win. And it's by some sporting figure. I don't remember, some older sporting figure. But yeah, I've used that forever since I was like younger.
Yeah.
So in essence, don't quit if you want to win.
Fantastic. And thank you to everybody who's watching or listening to this episode with Kathy Walterhouse from the Professional Rule Breaker. She has so many great resources, such great energy. I feel like I have a friend and colleague for life after our conversations, and I'm so excited to explore that. Don't forget to leave a rating or review for the podcast, and also go listen to Kathy's podcast and do the same for her. Until then, I'll be back with another great guest to share their wisdom. And thank you so much for listening and tuning in. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.